Okay, I think let's get started. Welcome, everyone. Thanks for joining us in the latest installment of Dieu Donné's Process and Practice series. My name is Hannah Katz. I'm the Grants and Education Manager here at Dieu Donné. Dieu Donné is the leading nonprofit cultural institution dedicated to serving emerging and established artists through the collaborative creation of contemporary art using the process of hand papermaking. Our programs include residencies, fellowships, and workspace opportunities for artists, on and offsite exhibitions, workshops, and classes for all ages and studio services. A couple notes on Zoom. We're going to be fielding questions throughout the webinar through the Q&A function, which you'll find at the bottom of your screen. Feel free to ask questions as we go along, and we'll save them for the end. A captioned recording of this event will be posted online later this fall. Today, we are excited to present a conversation between Workspace Residency alumni Juan Hinojosa, Melissa Joseph, and Fanny Allié, moderated by Eliana Blechman, Dieu Donné's inaugural Archive and Collection Fellow. We're also joined by Tatiana Ginsberg, Dieu Donné's Director of Artistic Projects and Master Collaborator. This program will be about 1 hour. We'll hear a brief presentation from each artist, followed by a group discussion, and we'll have time at the end for your questions. Please feel free to ask questions. As I said, we're very eager to have a dialogue with you. I'm now pleased to introduce Eliana Blechman, who is a curator and arts worker based in New York. She has curated and developed exhibitions through Art in Buildings, Project Art Distribution at NADA, and Walter's Hunter Loopsdorf Gallery and Dieu Donné. At Dieu Donné, Eliana leads exhibitions, collections, projects, and publications, including the recently published book on Howardina Pindel's work in paper at Dieu Donné. Eliana also curated our recent Workspace Residency exhibition, Pulp Memory, featuring all of the artists joining us today. If you missed the show, you can see more images on the Dieu Donné website. Welcome, Eliana.
Thanks, Hannah. I'm really happy to be here and to moderate this discussion with some of Dieu Donné's recent Workspace residents, who are all really amazing artists and have made some really great work with us. For those unfamiliar with the Workspace program, the residency was founded in 1990 to provide emerging New York artists with the opportunity to explore papermaking as an artistic medium. With a focus on experimentation and collaboration, the residency encourages artists to explore the creative possibilities inherent in the hand papermaking process and to develop the medium as a contemporary art form. Artists are selected by a rotating jury annually, and most of them have never made paper before, at least not at this scale. The artists work one-on-one, really collaboratively with Dieu Donné's professional studio collaborators, Tatiana Ginsberg, who's on this call with us, Amy Jacobs, and Catherine Delamater, who provide artistic and technical guidance to help them realize ambitious projects. So with that brief intro, we'll get started hearing from each of the artists. And we'll start with Melissa Joseph. Melissa Joseph is a Brooklyn-based multimedia artist. Her work addresses themes of memory, family history, and the politics of how we occupy spaces. She intentionally alludes to the labors of women, as well as experiences as a first-generation American and the unique juxtapositions of diasporic life. Melissa's work has been shown at the Delaware Contemporary, Woodmere Art Museum, Bemis Center for Contemporary Art, Brattleboro Museum and Art Center, and has been featured in Hyperallergic and New American Paintings, among others. She has participated in residencies at the Textile Arts Center, Brick, Dieu Donné, and the Archie Bray Foundation for Ceramic Arts. Welcome, Melissa.
Hi, thank you. Thanks to everybody for being here and for the opportunity to share about my experience at Dieu Donné. My name is Melissa Joseph, as you said. Thanks, Eliana. And I am an artist here in New York. I just will share. We have some images here, and I know it doesn't sound like it because I'm being measured, but I am so excited about everything that happens in the Dieu Donné studio. It's my happy place. It's my favorite place in the city. I think magic happens in there, and it's such a gift to be able to have done this residency, to be connected with this network, and to see all of the things that continue to come out of there. So I'll just talk for a few minutes about my experience as a resident. I was a little bit nervous coming in because I didn't have paper experience. Also, as Eliana mentioned, I didn't really know much about it. I think I remember saying, I don't know what I don't know. So until you get orientation, which I got to do with Juan, and it was a really fun day. You get a little glimpse into some of the possibilities that await you. And in this image, you're seeing a couple of the experiments that I did in a process piece where they take such meticulous notes of everything that you're doing. So I'm working with Amy Jacobs here on the left, and I also worked with Anela, who was an intern at the time. We were covering stones that I picked up somewhere. I'm always picking things up off the ground. And we were covering them in Abaca. And I had seen one of the things that is a great resource at Dieu Donné is the research or the archive library of works that former artists in residence or former artists who have worked with the studio have made and left behind. And it's this really invaluable collection of works that show you the limits of what paper can do. And I had seen a piece that Anne Hamilton made where she made a wax mold of her arm and then wrapped it over and over with flax fiber. So I was really taken with that as a way of doing a laminate cast. And here we were doing laminate casting of stone. Later on, I did laminate casting of some other things, and then they became containers for some of the textiles that I make in my practice when I'm not there at Dieu Donné. So I think we can skip to the next image, which in the course of my 5 days there, because what happens is you have an orientation and then you get a few more days to build your body of work that you choose. I fell in love somewhere along the line with painting with pulp, and it's pulp painting it's a really unique way of painting because you're using squeeze bottles like you see there, the sort of like ketchup and mustard squeeze bottles is what I think of them as. But it's this really engaging way of working where it's wet on wet, and it's generally very opaque, and sometimes the speed at which the pulp is coming out is unpredictable, at least for me. I think people work in different ways, and I enjoy the surprise of just kind of grabbing whichever top is on it and then responding to that, as opposed to making sure I had specific things. So here you're seeing me drawing, and my drawings come from, I think we can go to the next one. This is what it was like completed. The drawings that I did there, this is 30 by 40 inches on an Abaca base sheet with linen pulp paint on top. And it's a picture from my family photo archive, which I often work from. This was my grandfather's funeral in Kerala. And it's a picture of my grandmother on the right and my great-grandmother next to her, sort of sitting next to the body. So in the foreground, you can actually see my grandfather's head. And during COVID, I think, I was very much in a space where mourning was a big part of our culture. So it became a part of what we did, or what we thought about. So the next image, I think, I was also thinking about airplane windows. So I did a series of laying Abaca, taking out a little section that looked in the shape of an airplane window with a stencil, and we'll talk about that later, and then filling it with images from the archive. And then one more, I think. Is there one more, Eliana? This is the final piece that I made after all 5 of my days. It's a 60 by 40 inch piece. Again, pulp paint became my favorite thing to do there. And so this work was a diptych that was stretching it as far as I think I could to do this scale. And it's another image from the photo archive. Oh, one more. Okay. One more 30 by 40. Yeah, no one has really seen these works. I'm really excited to share them with you. I think my time is up, so I want to don't want to take too much time, but I'm happy to answer questions later on in the chat.
Yeah, thank you, Melissa. I know it's a quick, brief intro, but we'll come back to these later. And yeah, it's really amazing to see these really vibrant and detailed images to get to know your work off the bat. So now we'll hear from Fanny Allié. Fanny Allié's practice is influenced and directed by the lost elements of daily life. Acting as a modern-day scavenger of her own refuse and that of others, She incorporates found and discarded materials, including textiles and objects, into her work to produce contemporary records of the everyday. Fanny has exhibited widely, including at Princeton University, Brick Rotunda Gallery, Pratt Institute, and the Bronx Museum, among other places. And she is the recipient of various fellowships and residencies, including AIR Fellowship Program, Robert Blackburn Printmaking Fellowship, Elizabeth Foundation for the Arts Studio Program, Yaddo Residency, and McDowell Fellowship. Her work has appeared in the New York Times, Art News, New York Magazine, and Hyperallergic, to name just a few places. Fanny, welcome.
Thank you, Eliana. So I'm Fanny Allié. I'm going to briefly introduce my practice and process during the Workspace Residency that I did in 2020. So I work a lot with found textile and soft materials, as you can see on the slides, that I layer and sew, on top of each other to create what I call internal or emotional landscapes. That's how I see them. So my, as you said, Eliana, my studio practice is heavily influenced by these recycled and used material that I find on the daily basis. I always pick up a lot of stuff off the ground, like similar to Melissa. So I use my own clothing as well, donated fabric and scraps, little objects and jewelry that I found, material for the arts, and fabric also that used to belong to my family as well. And I also print on fabric. So as you can see on the image on the right, I use colorography. So I integrate elements of nature and texture especially when I'm on a residency and that I have access to an etching press. So I'm interested in my work in exposing the human traces that are present in these discarded materials. So I just wanted to give you a little bit of background of my work, in general. And now I'm going to show you a little more what I did, at Dieu Donné. So these two pieces that you can see on the screen are actually matrices that I created using leather and mixed media, mostly like small pieces of jewelry or like beads, as you can see on the right one. Water-resistant materials that I layered, glued, and coated with matte medium, similar to the prepping process when I work with calligraphy. So this series, the series for Dieu Donné was made during the pandemic, early 2020. So I worked from home as I could not go to the studio. So I just grabbed, a bunch of materials that I have, at the studio, and I brought it back. Home. So actually, working on this series gave me a sense of purpose during this pandemic. So I think it's important for me to say it. But I knew I wanted to experiment to work on this, but I hadn't really experimented with these matrices. So I wasn't sure if they were going to work or not. It was kind of working a little blindly. And I made about 20 of them. So in the next slide, so that was just a picture of, not really interesting, of myself working in the studio. That was the first day. So I didn't know what I wanted to do. I haven't found my process. I was just collaging, pieces that I already had in the studio. So, but that was just to show you the setup. And then the next slide, that's a close-up of one of the paper casts. So because I made some paper casts from the leather and mixed media matrices that I showed you before. So the one on the left was not a successful one, but you can see in this one the texture and the embossing and a little bit of colors. And on the right slide, the drying process, you know, as you put like, so I was working with Tatiana and she showed me how to use stones on the edges so the paper doesn't get warped. And then the next image, next slide, it's okay. So on the left, so you can see when I lift the matrix off the paper. So, yeah, I applied watercolor before, but it was kind of an unpredictable process as well. So sometimes, you know, there was nothing that was transferred, no watercolor, and sometimes it was kind of leaking a little too much. So it was a little, I'll talk about it later. And on the right side, on the image on the right, so that's a finished piece, one of them. And then the last slide, so also two completed pieces. So I reworked them a lot afterwards. So once they were dried, I sometimes added textile and then thread. I was actually sewing on them with a sewing machine. So the one on the left. And I was also using watercolor as well, you know, afterwards. And that was it. So I will be answering questions later if you're having. Thank you.
Thank you, Fanny. That was great. And last but not least, we'll hear from Juan Hinojosa. Juan Hinojosa is a mixed media artist who currently lives and works in New York. Constructed from found objects, his complex collage drawings intimately challenge greed, obsessive consumption, and the social stratification of American culture. His conflicts have resulted in a series of work that put on display his own bad habits, desires, and classic American greed. Juan attended Parsons School of Design and was awarded residencies at Material for the Arts, the Vermont Studio Center, and LMCC. His work has been featured in the New York Times, the Woodside Herald, and Open House New York. He's had solo shows at Allegra La Viola Gallery, Materials for the Arts, Union College Schenectady, and he was part of the biennial at El Museo. Welcome, Juan.
Hello, hi. Nice to be here. Thanks for having me. Let's start with the slides. So this is my first day at Dieu Donné. I was nervous, I was unprepared, and I didn't know what I was doing. That's Melissa and Amy next to me. It was a great first day. We learned a lot. I found it to be really informative. I had to learn how to figure out how to work in this process, because the process kind of begins backwards, where I normally work reactionary towards items that I have in my studio. I had to pre-plan everything. So next slide. So I had to pre-select the colors I was going to use, which was like weird because I was just like grab what I have in the studio. So this was definitely a game changer. And I picked a very like odd color palette that I would normally not work in. So, you know, things happen. And I really wanted to focus on like a color per piece as I went. So I wanted to focus on a black and a green, which is exciting. But next slide. So before I can like start with the colors, I had to work on my concept, which took like weeks of like cutting out Mylar, making a huge ass stencil, and literally cutting my finger as they would cut around like the plastic. It was really, really annoying. But I think the results came out pretty good. Next slide. So to make the stencil, we needed a blowout using black paper pulp. Had help of Amy, and then 2 interns helped to help peel off the edges and like get the pulp to not like come off. It was quite a hassle. I think it took like an hour or so per piece, which was really, really annoying. But lucky for me, I had help. So yay. Next slide. So once that happened, I got to layer the black paper pulp on top of like the green, which here looks a little turquoisey, which is kind of funny. And then I can like literally then start the collage process, which I had to also reconfigure. Thank you. Because normally I was put down paper on paper and I glue away. Because the paper pulp is wet, I had to rethink my entire process, use fabrics, shoelaces, patches, so things that were fabric based, because that would absorb the water that exists all over the surface of the blue and black paper pulp, which was exciting and hard and confusing and made life difficult. But why do a residency if not to challenge yourself? If I knew what I was doing, I wouldn't do any of these things, So it was fun to like put myself in an awkward position. But as an artist, I use a lot of found materials and found objects. So as you can see here, I have like coat check tags, iron patches, stickers, shoelaces, lace. I found a lot of lace at MFTA that came in handy. I don't like lace, I hate it, but for this project, it worked perfectly. So it's fun finding things that you use, that you don't like to use, that you will use anyway. Next slide.
That's it. That's the last one.
Oh, okay, cool. Well, that's it then, guys. Thank you.
Thanks, Juan. Well, this is great. Now, those were amazing little intros to all of your work. Thank you, Juan, and again to Fanny and Melissa for these insights into your time at the Dieu Donné studio. And now we get to shift into the discussion section of the talk. So you can all rejoin me back in the video cameras on club. And I'd like to start off by diving into some of the more thematic elements of your work. And there are a lot of, I think, surprising connections between the three of you. You all explore memory in some way, either personal and family memory, cultural, social. Can you start off by discussing some of these influences and how you approach these ideas in your practices? And Melissa, since you're the next slide, why don't you start us off?
Okay, thank you. I work with images from my family photo archive, but I do think in a larger sense, I view my practice kind of as like I'm a channel of sort of these stories or these moments from my ancestors to, whoever's looking at them now or maybe in the future, who knows. So I keep this archive of images, and I have a lot of them, like some people do, but I'm actually learning is interesting. Newer generations don't have these physical photos to flip through as much anymore. Someone was telling me they have almost no physically printed photos of their kid who's like 3 or 4. Almost everything is digital, and it caught me off guard a little bit to think about that. But yeah, so I try to find these universally accessible moments through hyper specific memories that I have, or my past, my family's past, and recreate them in a way that that allows people to see something familiar or find a bit of themselves in that space. I don't know, is that
I really love that. Yeah, no, that's great. Finding a universal theme in a personal memory. And Fanny, you to an extent are also kind of finding personal and social together. You're using your own refuse, but you're trying to reach universal themes. Is that right?
Yes. So, regarding the theme of memory, so yes, as I said in the introduction, I use my own sometimes. So, of course, it has a personal connection to it, like my own and my family's, bed sheets, garment, rags. So it is connected to myself, but it's also, I use a lot of found materials, and which has, a lot of signs of time passing, like holes, stains, smells even. So you feel the human usage in those materials. So I think those found materials has the memory, they kind of keep the memory in the fabric. So I'm interested in this too. And of course, when you talk about fabric, it touches everyone because we all use fabric. It's like our envelope, that we carry with us. It's almost like, you go to like a place where people live naked, and usually you have to, there's a lot in France actually. Yeah, there is a lot, so it's, yeah, it's like almost like a second body that you, and yeah, and I'm interested in yeah, as I said, the trace and the memory. Yeah. So which hopefully, is a collective. Yeah, that's the goal. You start from the personal and you hopefully, touches more like a collective memory. Yeah.
Juan, how about, can you chime in on your use of materials and how you're dealing with cultural memory?
Yeah, for sure. So it's funny how like the three of us are all picking up things off the street, which is kind of awesome. And then during COVID, I couldn't. I felt like a bad idea. But then that passed, so I'm back to picking up trash. So I do pick up things. I think on some like level in my head or my hair, I'm doing it to like pick up parts of like pop culture and parts of New York or parts of like I pick up like souvenirs as if like I'm like a traveler, or like I'm like temporarily here. I think it's part of like being Latino and like what happened in the last like 6 years, like, and like just I don't know, not feeling like you belong. So you want to like hold on to things that like make you feel a part of society when society doesn't really want you around sometimes. And I also find like it's my way of making like a time capsule of the world, at least like my time in it, which is always kind of funny. But yeah, that's how I'm approaching memory and items.
Yeah, what are some of the found or pop culture items in these works?
I believe I have some high school or college like lettering logos in the middle, I think with the M. And I think the eyeball might be some weird like Illuminati thing, which is kind of funny. And then I have to say, I believe the ice cream cone is from an actual like brand. I couldn't tell you which one it is though, but I kind of see the works also as like a Where's Waldo? So like go look and see what you find and report back later, because it gets to be like a lot of things.
Yeah, do Melissa and Fanny, do you find yourself kind of losing track of your source materials, or are you more focused on them?
Yeah, I mean, for me, I think when everything is, I mean, not this one, but it's more the usual work, because the paperwork were more minimalistic. But yeah, I mean, even for them, I lose track because I don't remember which one I used on the matrix, But in my textile work, I also lose track, except if it's like small little items that are very recognizable. I tend to lose track.
I think I remember them as like, and I'm sorry, I don't have found objects in my pulp paintings, but I have them all over the place. They're kind of like markers, like like Hansel and Gretel leaving the like breadcrumbs. Like for me, they're like kind of little markers for me to go back to a place where I was before. When I encounter that object. So, and I also think of them as, because we're talking about memory, having their own memories too. So, so then these objects that have their own history are colliding with our path, which has a separate history. And then we start like a new path together. That's kind of interesting for me.
That's great. Yeah, and this is just a photo of some of these found materials. I mean, even the photographs that you're using, Melissa, we can think of them as found objects. They're just found from your family.
It's true, and sometimes they're found in like oblique ways. Through I kind of like like they're like a photo of a slide, and they might be they're indirect and odd in that way.
Great. Well, we have some really amazing videos of your time in the studio. I'd love to hear a bit more about your process, how you came to develop these series. None of you came to Dieu Donné with much a paper background, and you really developed very cohesive bodies of work. So I'm really curious about that process and how you landed on what you ended up making.
Personally, I walked in like really cocky because I use paper all the time. I walked out that first day with my ass like on my face. Like, I know nothing. I respect notebooks. I respect notepads. I respect Post-its now. Like, paper is like the best. I don't know how you people make it happen, but I learned a lot. But in those videos, which I don't really make art videos because I feel like the mystery of like the magic should be the mystery. But in this instance, I was just trying to pull things that I could collage on top of like wet surfaces that then would take the adhesive over it. That's also super wet. So using a metal chain was the first time I've ever used metal like on paper. But what you don't see in the video on the left here is that I went the wrong way when I was putting the chain down. So I had to like reverse it backwards and try it again with Amy like recording it. So, you know, fail, but it turned out well afterwards though.
Yeah, it all came together in the end. Thanks to our collaborators, I guess.
I want to just interject a big shout out to Amy and Tatiana, because I feel like, yeah, we come in with so little kind of, it's like we don't understand the vastness of what is paper. And I think it was really nice. You get overwhelmed pretty quickly. And then just to have the reassurance over and over, like, it's okay, you'll figure it out. You should be having fun. That was really an amazing part of the experience, like to have the comfort knowing that Amy and Tatiana knew what was going on. So like, we didn't have to, in a way. That was really liberating.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah, and here's a video of Tatiana and Fanny working on one of your pieces.
Yes.
Yeah, Fanny, can you talk what's going on here? What step in the process are we at?
So okay, so right now we are when I'm about to lift the matrix off the paper just to see how how it kind of transferred on the paper, like the relief.
Wow.
But there was no color on this one. So I use for this plate, for this matrix, I use cork, because I needed to work with water resistant. But in the beginning, for the process, in the beginning, I didn't know that it was going to be so much water, and then that it would damage everything. So my first matrix was with cardboard, and I was able to like do one paper cast. It's a paper cast. This is called the matrix, and this is called the paper cast. I just learned yesterday. So then I think the process was very natural, and I didn't have to like research like crazy. And Tatiana was just helping me, and she helped me a lot to figure it out what would work the best, the right drying method, and then once I found this, then I was just producing.
Mm-hmm.
It didn't, I didn't have to like think too much afterwards once I have the method. Yeah. So
yeah,
it was
I think that video and these photos really help understand the process. I think,
yes.
I'd seen the finished works and even seeing the final product and working at Dieu Donné, I wasn't exactly sure what you had done until I'd seen these videos and these images, and you're really making a whole work before you even start on the paper.
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah, the work is actually before. It's not like you, Melissa, for example, where you're like painting on top, and the work was made before coming to Dieu Donné. So if I didn't make the work, I wouldn't have been able to print to make any cast. So I really have to. So thanks to the pandemic, I was able to make a lot.
And do you consider these leather pieces also finished works, or are they just kind of part of the production process?
No, I don't consider. No, I don't consider them, because the colors and stuff, it's really not my. No, and also I glued with a glue gun, and I don't. Yeah, no, they're like process work. I mean, no, it's not. They're not finished work. They're like more like tools. Yeah.
They're beautiful by themselves, but yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Thank you.
And then Melissa, I love this photo of you with your phone for the reference image.
I spent a lot of time. Eventually, I learned to print the photos out, just because like it's hard to. But there's like so many challenges. You know, one of the things I think about is that this whole experience or process is a conversation between me and the material. So you know, I might try something, and then the paper might say no to that. You know, and then it's my job to like have a new question or a new response. And I think that's why these were, and like I love doing these, and I'm curious if the other two feel this way. Like there were so many things to do, but somehow this rose to the top as the most compelling way for me to work with paper. And I think I could do this kind of endlessly. And the more you do it, the more you start to understand it, but then it opens up new questions, or you can scale up, and then that brings along new problems to solve. Yeah, I think, you know, something that's really important about this for me is how much it made me respond. And then those methods impacted how I worked in my studio and other materials, because we had a lot of time in between sessions sometimes. But I know I can see ways that I use felt now, like formally, that are directly influenced by the way that I had to use the pulp paint.
That's really interesting. Yeah, we have some photos of your felt works too.
Yeah. Hi guys. It seemed to me like a really natural transition from fiber to fiber, but actually it is a little bit different. You know, obviously, you know, there's very, very many differences, but I really do love like this idea of finding a way to translate visual language across mediums. So now I'm even trying with ceramics, and it's a really fulfilling thing to see that this visual language can be translated across things. And the other thing that I loved, you know, were these laminate casts with the Abaca. So we somehow found time to do. I think I even brought these home to my studio, and I would wrap them on my own. But on the left, there are the one small one on the left is wrapped with flax. The other two are Abaca only. And I was able to create these little vessels that could then become containers for the felted archive images. And I hope that I can continue this series, because it's there's something about these materials together, and the idea, the act of holding, that I find very comforting and sort of like an act of care. So I hope that these can continue.
Yeah, it sounds like you found a lot of relationships between your usual practice and what you'd learned at Dieu Donné with paper, which is amazing. Juan and Fanny, did you find similar relationships? Is your paper practice totally different from your traditional practice?
Yeah, like fuck yeah. It's weird because like I make paper cats now, sculptural cats, which I don't think I was ever going to do, or even entered my mind to make a paper sculpture, because it's impossible. It's paper. But at Dieu Donné, anything is possible. And there you go. 2 new paper cats, which oddly are heavier than the plastic ones. So go figure. But yeah, I think the idea of constructing something to hold, like I do hold the cats all the time. But because these are covered in like gems, because the gems are mixed in with the pulp, they're a little bit more fragile, but you know, they're also very soft. So it's kind of weird. They're not alive, obviously, that'd be even more weirder, but they are like really precious. And it was like a surprise to leave the program with a new method of making different, the same sculpture, but just different. Dare I say better, perhaps. But now I'm making more cat sculptures out of paper in the studio. So it's an addiction. Thank you a lot. It's like smoking essentially, or drugs. So thanks, Eliana, you're the best.
Well, I love the cats, so I'm very happy to hear that.
Cosign.
Thank you.
Fanny, how about you? Have you, I think these are some of your non-paper works here.
Yes, I mean, the paperwork and the textile work, I mean, there's a lot of connections visually, of course, because they're two different translations of what but I don't really see a lot of, I see the series are more something that I would like to pursue in parallel to my other practice, but since it's paper-based, it's hard to, it doesn't influence me. I mean, I see them as separate, but I really wish I could continue, like this, and experiment more and maybe larger. But that would be I mean, I wish this could happen. But other than that, because I can't really reproduce them in the studio, like Juan with your sculptures, it's hard to, I feel like I don't see so many relationship between this and the regular work and the Dieu Donné work. Yeah.
That's really interesting because, visually there are clear relationships to them, but they're obviously done in very different ways, and and they reveal different forms. And I think it's about 1:45. I think we want to save some time for questions. Hannah, do we have some questions that we should break into from the audience?
We have one so far. I want to encourage everyone to add your questions to the Q&A at the bottom. But we can start with this first one. It's a question from Melissa. Was it like a scratch board what you used? Was the color underneath the red color? I'm not sure which work that's referring to, but maybe
I think maybe the one, the diptych of the sink. I don't know. That one's like a red copper. But I'm not sure. Anyway, no, so it's not like a scratch board. It could be because everything is wet. So when you're working, so one way you could choose to work would be to actually carve the paper. This is like the magic of paper. It's everything. You can carve it, you can cast it, you can paint with it, you can embed things in it. So for me, I was doing layer upon layer of wet paper. So wet on wet. And then when they dry, they get pressed and fused together. But it's kind of like, I say ketchup and mustard squeeze bottles because I think that they are. And I think like, if you can imagine taking a ketchup and mustard squeeze bottle and painting with it, that's kind of what it's like. And at the beginning, it's a little disorienting. I think I was like more gestural with the marks, but then you can, like with anything over time, you get more control over it. So, and Amy added these like icing piping tips to them, so they were smaller, and so then it was like a whole new world, because then you could do like really tiny marks, and I think that really changed the game for me a little bit too.
I love
so what
thingies.
Oh,
They help so much, like with the angling and like the squeezing and like the direct like location.
Yeah.
Otherwise, I'm like a
Yeah.
Like spout out.
No, and honestly, I'm not gonna lie, like that happens sometimes because like either I was lazy and I didn't like shake or like clean the thing, and like all you want like a tiny dot, but all of a sudden you have like a huge pile of a color. And so that's what I mean about the conversation, because then, okay, well, what am I gonna do now? Because you can't, I mean, you could, but I would never just scrap a piece over a pile of pulp. So it's like now a new challenge. Like, how am I going to save this?
Definitely. I was there a lot in the beginning with the tears.
Yeah, I mean, it is really like a learning process, you know, especially like people who have worked with paper a long time can control it to an extent, but sometimes it does things that you don't expect, especially, you know, you work on it while it's wet and then you don't see it how it's really going to be until a week or two later when it's dry.
Yeah.
What was that experience like for all of you, kind of waiting to see this final result and not really knowing if what you had planned would work out?
Well, it changed it changed a lot, because sometimes when it's wet, it's much darker and it's more like precise somehow. So when it dries, it's like much less. So that's why much less, you know, visible, like hardly visible. So that's why I have to paint afterwards, you know, when it was dry. And and like Melissa and Juan, it was really hard for me to control the colors, you know, like that I was applying on the matrix. And then it was like really, that was like the biggest challenge for, you know, in the making of those pieces, the colors. Yeah, which I usually never paint.
I'm really curious about your color choices. Fanny, yours are very muted in a lot of ways, and it sounds like you added some extra color on top in order to get that deeper. Was that intentional? Was that sort of just playing around with the material?
So I think for this series, it's not that muted. It's a little bit different from the textile. But I have to choose some colors, and I didn't want to be too random, because I usually don't choose the colors since they exist already, you know, like they exist in the world already. So I was just I realized I was following the colors that were on the matrices, you know. I was just, and then sometimes I was choosing one next to the other, you know, like just in contrast, or it was kind of a difficult, I don't know, it's not natural, like colors to me. It's like, I'm not a painter, or, you know, like it's not easy to choose.
Yeah, it seems like it can be hard. And Juan, you touched on this a little bit in your presentation about having to plan out the colors in advance. What was that process like?
It was tricky. Like, I'm not a painter either. I went to school to become a painter and I failed, so which is fine.
No.
Oh yeah. I'm a bad painter. Like, it's okay. But picking the colors beforehand, like, it was really out of whim and with like a hope and a prayer, like a Bon Jovi, like praying the same thing to fucking work out. But I think Melissa said it best. Like, Dieu Donné like has this magical spell or aura that like things do work out. Like, you do put the pieces together and you do like, it's just great. So the colors I chose early on, weeks or months prior, like worked out perfectly for what I was doing back like 4 months after I had cut out the stencil and did all that other stuff. Like, it was great. I'm happy.
We were talking about color. There's this like sort of graveyard of paper pulp colors that, you know, artists have used and then are left over. And I remember in the beginning, like, Amy, it's so like, it fits, it's like Dieu Donné is one size fits all, because, you know, if I had wanted very specific colors, I could have sent them, they would have matched them, which is in itself an amazing thing that happens. But I kind of, you know, again, not knowing what you don't know, I just said, I'll just use whatever colors are there. And so in the beginning, you know, the colors I was using were dictated by what colors were available, which, you know, every artist has like specificity in different places. And for me, I prefer that part to be a little bit chance, and then I will control other parts of the process. And then as time went on, it seemed like I was leaning towards certain colors. So then we would make sure we had more of a particular range of colors. And so it became more considered moving on, but that was a really natural progression of seeing what I leaned towards and then going in that direction.
And I mean, you're working from actual photographs. So were you kind of manipulating the colors or tweaking them a bit?
Something that kind of happened early is that I realized I don't even know how it happened, but I started working on different color abaca. I think I was curious about the difference between tinted abaca and tinted cotton, and how that, or maybe one of the other artists that was working in the studio had requested like these tinted sheets to be made. And I got to see how beautiful like this navy blue abaca was. And so that, again, is almost a by chance encounter, but just, it's not totally by chance, because if you're in that place, you're going to see really cool things happening. So, and then be influenced, I think, by it. So I saw these beautiful vats of pulp, and I thought like, oh, they don't all have to be on a clear sheet of abaca, that like you can actually start with a color, and then it starts to play with positive and negative space in a different way too. And that's something that I don't always get with the felt. My felt palette is much more muted. So it was a really nice experience for me to work with these really vibrant colors that I don't normally use in the natural wool world.
Maybe in a related way, we have a question that goes off the theme of being influenced by other things happening in the studio. So there's one very directly. Did the other Workspace residents' work affect your own process in the studio? And how did collaborating with Amy and Tatiana and the other studio staff affect your process, coming from an individual approach in a private studio to this collaborative space?
Great questions.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, we don't really work with the other work. I mean, I don't know about you too, but I've seen the other residents maybe once in my in my group. So we don't really collaborate. I mean, maybe some do, but I didn't. And it's like you work on your own, actually. Yeah, I mean, working with Tatiana was really great. I mean, she's really listening to what I want and what I wanted to achieve, and trying to find solution to everything. Yeah. So it just it was very smooth. I felt a smooth collaboration.
I thought working with Amy was fantastic. Like, she's so patient with me and my annoying questions and redoing certain things, and that insane Mylar cutout I made. Like, I was like, thank you, honestly. I had a floating circle in the middle. It was so hard to peel it off without ruining the entire process. We did it like
those stencils are very difficult. Yeah.
Yeah.
They're very fiddly.
We did it 8 times. Like, I would have murdered me. And the 2 interns you guys have there too were also super patient and very nice. And they held the chain, and as I was like, doing the chain, like, who am I? Like, it's insane.
Yeah. It's so true. Yeah.
That being said, though, I think Amy is a gem, and I love her and the entire staff and the interns.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I just agree with everything that you all just said. It's a special personality to be able to, like, I don't know, facilitate and not control, but still allow for growth, but still share wisdom. It's really I'm really in awe of how the whole Workspace residency works and allows personal voice to come through, but still steers you in a way that is really meaningful.
This is sort of a lovely question to end on. How did you hear about Dieu Donné, and why did you apply to work with paper?
Ladies.
Anyone can go first.
Yeah, I can go first, and I just wanted to say that I applied 8 times.
Wow.
I'm kind of proud of it in a way. So 8 years. So yeah, I finally got it. So I mean, I heard, you know, from a long time. I mean, more than 8 years, obviously. So yeah, so it's good
Yeah,
to
I think
try.
that's a common experience, I think, with a lot of the workspace residents. We only accept 4 artists every year, based on, space issues and staff, and it takes a lot of time to work with each artist and develop their bodies of work. So for anyone still applying, there's hope after 8 years.
Yes, there is.
Keep applying, keep applying.
Keep going.
Yeah, I think, a lot of, because so many wonderful and amazing artists have gone through there, it's almost impossible if you're watching, a career of contemporary artists in New York that you won't come across Dieu Donné. I think, it was Jean Shin, I think for me was one of the first people that I saw that had done like a really cool cast paper sculpture project. And then I think I heard about Dieu Donné second from a teacher at a residency who had done not the residency, but she had done just classes when there were still classes, and said it was really, really amazing. So it got on my radar that way. And then I wanted to apply because I don't know, I just knew. It's like one of those things you just feel like, I was like, oh, I want to be there. So
I applied during COVID in a sea of applying to a bunch of things. So I kind of like throw out my net and see what I catch. I did not think I would get it. And I remember the interview was on Zoom with Tatiana and Amy. And I swore the minute I turned off the camera, bombed. I failed. Then I got the email. I was like, oh, you got it. I was like, what the fuck? I was so surprised. So surprised. But like, I think it's important to apply to programs in like 8 times. Like I've been applying to like those head print shop for like 15 years. I'm applying again next year. I don't care. But I think I learned about Dieu Donné like through MFTA and then through Lena Puerta, who did the work program like 2-3 years ago. I love her work and I love like what was made at the residency. So I was like, let's try this year. So I was happy.
So it's 2 p.m. I want to thank all of these artists for joining us and sharing more about your process and insights into your work. It's been such a great conversation. And I also want to thank everyone who joined us live on Zoom and submitted great questions. We really appreciate your time and, engaging with our artists and the work that's coming out of our studio. And I also want to thank Eliana for moderating and curating these workspace programs. Have a great day. I'm going to end the webinar now.
Thank
Bye,
you.
everyone.
Thank you very much. Thank you, everyone. Thanks.